Hey everyone, this is Wei, and thanks for joining me here once again. Now for this exercise, I'm going to be shading a water drop on surface, and it's a really good exercise for me to show you how you can shade realistically. So let's get started, and I'll talk about the process along the way. Alright, so let's draw this little water drop on the surface. So I'm just going to draw in the shape here. Let's see, make sure I'm in frame. Just gonna rough in this water droplet. Okay, kind of like, all right, let me move this up a little bit. Now we don't need to, go by this reference too much, but we just need to know, how the light works. So even if the shape of this water droplet is a little bit different, it's okay. Now, for this, I am just using regular print paper, just your regular paper whites, and then I'm using a graphite. So it's kind of almost like your number 2 pencil. And the reason I'm using this lighter pencil is because for realism, you kind of want to go a little bit lighter so you don't, and really build up the surface, and so that way you don't make you don't go too dark and kind of mess it up. All right, so this one I'm just going to sketch in the shape. You got a little highlight there, and I know it's a little bit different from the reference, but it's okay. Okay, so we want to draw in this because this is where the reflection is coming from, so it's really important. And then over here there's another reflection, and right here there's another one. I'm not sure if I want to do that one or not because there's a lot of stuff going on here. All right, so let's just I'm gonna ignore some of the smaller details. Okay, and then right here, this is really important. So I'm just gonna, this is where the shadow is, right? The shadow kind of comes in like this. Okay, and then there's a little bit of reflection underneath here. So let's get shading on this so we can start seeing the results. Okay, so right here, it's gonna be dark. And as you can see, for this kind of stuff, see how light I'm going? It's just really light on the pencil. I'm barely pushing into it. So you kind of have to get used to, doing these kind of little strokes like this. It's basically like that. Of course, not as dark, right? But I'm just kind of showing it to you. So if you go light enough, you can shade it really just very subtle. And you will need a lot of hand control with this kind of stuff. And I do talk about this things you can do, to get this kind of hand control. And it does take time. I mean, it's not something you can just, do right off the bat if you haven't been drawing a long time. Okay, so I'm slowly building it up, and I'm also cross-hatching a little bit. So I'm going into different directions, and I'm trying to tilt my body. Or I can turn the paper, but it might be a little bit easier if I keep the paper stationary for the camera. Okay, so right now I kind of got a little base layer going on. And now I can go in for the shadow. So the stroke, now this is important, and I'll keep showing you these little strokes I'm doing. You see how I'm shading the shadow is really light, and it's almost like a circular shape. I'm actually doing this kind of wiggly shape, and that's how I'm shading it. So it's kind of like, and if you do enough of it, it will, even itself out. You see how, right? Now, of course, this one's a little bit messy, but if you do it a little bit more careful, a little bit lighter, it does work. And again, it's a slow process. I mean, it doesn't come out that quickly. So, don't get discouraged if you keep doing this and nothing seems to be happening. It actually is. It's just developing so slowly that you might not be able to see it that quickly. Okay. So right here is dark. That's important because this is the shadow right here. And the reason why it's light right here is because light is entering is refracting through the water drop, so it leaves a little kind of bright area right here because it's hitting it again. The light is hitting that area again, and that's kind of what gives the illusion of this, why this thing looks like a water drop on the surface. So if I want to soften this edge up a little bit, you see how I'm doing these wiggly shapes like this, real softly. Now I can also smudge it, but I might do that later on. But let's just focus on this kind of stroke because it is actually really good for you to be able to do. Okay, so I'm going to correct the shape a little bit. All right, so let's get back to this main reflection area right here. Okay. So actually, let's make it a little bit bigger. Looks a little odd right now. Okay, curvature. Try to keep the curvature of the. All right, so let's go a little bit darker now. So I'm going to push down a little bit harder since this gradation is very important to make this look like a water drop. So it gets darker up here and then lighter down here, right? And then here, that's the surface, that's the edge, I mean. Now here's the tricky part. In order to make this part feel white, the surrounding actually needs to be a little bit darker, right? So I am going to switch to a 2H. So you have a B, and then you have the HB, and then you have the 1H, and this is a 2H. So it's a lot harder. Okay, so if you look at the line quality of this, it's very hard and light. And this kind of allows you to shade it, so that it's not too dark. It's easier to get really subtle light shading onto something. So I'm just going to shade this as if I'm kind of darkening the whole surface, right, where the water is resting on. So as you can see how light it is, even though I'm pushing into the paper a little bit, it's still very light. And that's kind of what I want, because I don't want this to be too dark. And if I want it darker, I could always just go in with a B later, but I'm just gonna. So the movement of, it's basically, like little cylinder shapes I'm shading. And you can see how that slowly builds it up, right? Not too quickly. Because you really need to hit, all the surface of the paper or the tooth. So if you do a really harsh line, it's you're still only covering that small area. So that's why when you draw something and you want it to be hyper realistic, it's not hard. It just takes time. You can see how I gotta keep shading, and then now you see how it's nicely filled in. But you see how long that took, right? It's just like I gotta keep doing it, switching back and forth. Get a little bit more cross hatching onto it. Okay, so I can actually use this and go in here a little bit. But there is another thing. Given any surface of a paper, there's only so much grip to it. And if you keep rubbing it with like a really hard pencil, like a 2H, you're gonna lose that, the surface, right? The texture. You're actually gonna rub it off. And it's gonna be super smooth then. And at that point, it gets a little bit harder to actually draw on the surface because it's, the tooth of the paper is gone. So it's not gonna hold on to much of your lead, your strokes on top, because it's like drawing on a very smooth surface. Okay, so now I'm back to the B, and here I'm hitting it harder because I know needs to be dark. And see, it's very soft strokes, and you can see how it's slowly building up, right? And that's the key, slowly building up. And the more careful you are, the cleaner it is, and the more hyper realistic it will be, if that is your goal. I mean, I'm not too crazy about hyper realism, but I'm just doing this just to show you how you can do it. And a simple exercise like this is actually provides for a good demonstration. Okay. All right. So this is dark, dark, dark. Keeps going up. It's dark. This is still dark. Now eventually I'm gonna go a little bit darker, and I'm gonna probably bring in the 2B. But let's just push with the B a little bit more before we hit it, because I do want to kind of exaggerate the gradation on this. And by exaggerating, I'm just gonna push the values a little bit more contrast on everything, and then that way you can see it better. It's like sometimes you just don't want to do exactly what you see in the reference. So it might not be as interesting. Okay, I wasn't looking, that's why I hit that spot. Just let me dab it out with an eraser right now, just so I don't get too messy. Okay, so it's coming along, right? Let's see, this part probably needs to be darker. Let me soften this up. I think I made this edge a little bit too hard. So I'm just gonna soften it up around. Okay. This top edge, I'm probably gonna make it a little bit darker, just to give it more contrast right there. So that I can pop that white area out. And so if I do the background darker, it's gonna pop that out. Okay, so I mean, you can see it's getting there, right? Let's continue on the shadow a little bit more. This part a little bit darker too. The darker I make this, the lighter this will appear. And if I end up, let's say it's a little bit too dark, I want to line it, I would just get one of these erasers and just kind of dab it. You don't want to smear. You never want to smear with this kneaded eraser, because you end up just making a mess, smearing the lid everywhere. So you just kind of want to dab it like that. Okay, so let's see. It's coming along. Let's push it a little bit more before I bring in the 2B pencil. So again, this is more of the shading, and I'm going to highlight this edge a little bit, so it's really going to pop it out. Now, I don't want a hard edge here too, so I need to, if I make it dark, I'm going to have to shade it in and kind of, spread it out evenly, right? Because it's really not a hard edge. It's the contrast between the two that gives the illusion that it is a hard edge. Okay, so right here, I mean, actually I can feel it. I don't know if, obviously you can't see it. You can feel it like I can with the pencil. This part right here is getting a little bit slippery. You see that little blotch right there, right? That's a result of this area is like so shaded in. I'm rubbing so much into it that it's actually gone smooth. So I gotta be a little bit careful with that. Okay, so it's actually getting there. Let me see this part right here. I don't know, it's bugging me for whatever reason. It's a little bit too hard. I'm gonna soften it up. Smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so let's get my 2B, and I'm gonna push it a little bit more because this will give me a little bit harder edge. I mean a darker. Push that in. And this part right here is paper is really getting slippery. Okay, push this darker. Right, and I'll probably push the top a little bit darker too, just to make it a little bit more interesting. A little bit more contrast. Hopefully it'll pop it out a little bit more. Okay, so that kind of gives it a little bit more punch, right? A little bit more emphasis. And back to the B. I'm going to try to smooth some of these areas out. Okay, so it's getting there. I mean, the more I look at it, the more little things I can see, and then you just kind of matter of time to get it more and more accurate. But at the same time, not smoothing out the paper too much, where you lose all the grip and then you probably can't draw anymore. Okay, so let's see the top area right here. Let's exaggerate that a little bit. Trying to really pop this edge out. Yeah, it feels a lot better, right? You see, like by making this dark, now you say the whole edge just comes alive. Just gonna smooth it out. Okay. So you see some areas are nicely smooth and it's starting to look more and more realistic. Okay, and I'm gonna now I'm seeing all these little this areas. I'm just gonna do this. Kind of makes it a little bit more realistic. And let's see the 2B. Let's do the shadows a little bit higher, a little bit deeper. So at this point of the drawing, I'm not as light on with the pencil because I really have to push into the paper a little bit more. Since everything has, it's a little bit tone value on everything. So I could be a little bit, a little bit looser. I don't have to be so careful anymore. Let's see. And once in a while, I stop and kind of look at the camera image. So that allows me to see the whole drawing smaller, so I can see everything clearer at once. And it's the whole process of zooming out so you can see the full picture. And then when you do that, you're gonna see like what areas is wrong or a little bit too light or too dark, and how it compares to everything else. It's the same thing as when you squint your eyes. But having a camera there actually helps too, so you can see the image, full image, much smaller. Okay. All right, I think that's not bad. I mean, I could probably clean up things a little bit more, but I think you got the idea. I don't want to bore you too much by doing the same thing over and over again, but sometimes drawing is like that. There's a lot of perspiration, right? Perspiration, is that what you call it? Okay, so this edge right here actually pretty light. I wonder if I can use this. Just cutting it out a little bit with the electronic eraser. That gives it a little bit more bounce light. Okay, so I think you get the idea. I might push this a little bit more, but overall this is pretty much like 90% done. I might touch it up off camera a little bit just to show you a little bit cleaner result. But just give it a shot and see how it goes, and I will see you next time.